what got me out of it was that, as you all probably know, there was the law back before, I think, 1984 was that the studios, the same people that made the films, couldn't distribute the films, couldn't own the theaters, right? So you had all different people. So little guys like me could then get our B films in, and we could also get them on, well, they weren't disc then, but we could get them on cassette, we could get them on HBO, because they needed product. Reagan, I think, or Carter, I think it was between the two, but they got rid of that. So the same people who owned the theaters could also distribute the films, could make the films, could own the foreign distributors, could own HBO, could own Showtime, could own the people that distributed the businesses that distributed cassettes. So they just began to show their own stuff. And the door was slammed fairly fast for me. So there I was, 40-something years, and I wasn't really good. I mean, I never, except for this, I'd never really been hired by anybody. I'd always kind of made my own films and was pleased to do that, because what we do is we would make it for, this film was made for $1.5 million, and then we could sell it for 2 to 3 times the amount, because that's how much it would have cost Fox and Columbia to make those films. So it made sense to them. They could see how good the film was. They knew what they would get. They could buy it for less than what it would cost for them to make, and it was a win-win. But at that point, it stopped. So having been only a producer and a director, I had no transferable skills to anything. I couldn't shine shoes. I couldn't become a lawyer. I couldn't sell insurance. I didn't know what else to do. So what I decided to do, I'd been going to Cannes, to the film market, for the past 10 to 15 years, to the Cannes Film Festival there. There's also a film market where they sell pictures like ours, where independent filmmakers would go show their films, and they would be bought, the rights would be bought for France or Italy. So I would bring my films there, and I would sell my films, so I'd also try to decide what film I wanted to make next. In the process, I would see tons of really lousy films, really stinking films. So I'd duck out the back, and I'd go to the Croisette, the boardwalk in Cannes, and there was a guy that baked there. He made fantastic bread. And so during the 10 years, and I spoke a bit of French, so I became friends with the guy, and after what happened, the monopolization of the film biz, I didn't know what else to do, so I called the guy up in France and said, can I spend a year with you, and you don't have to pay me, and I'll learn to bake. And so I did. I went there and spent a horrible year with, I wasn't married at the time, which made it even worse, and bread, great wine, cheese. It was absolutely in the south of France. It was horrible, and a lot of it was tax and deductible. Absolutely revolting. And then I said, well, where would I want to live? Where's my favorite place? I'd lived in L.A. And had come down here and loved it here. And it seemed like, and kind of looked all over the United States, where would I want to begin a hard crust European style bakery. And San Diego seemed to make sense. So Bread and Sea, we began Bread and Sea in 1993. Used a lot of the same, if you look in there, main thing was I wanted to make it a bread show. I wanted to use some of the skills of promotion and PR. I learned how to bake over there, beside all that other stuff in Cannes. So I imported an oven from France, set up this place. San Diego had not had hard crusted bread heretofore. People thought it was just stale bread at the time, and then I had to explain. But fortunately, the timing was right, so you could watch the bread being made and shaped. We still bake there, so you can watch that now, although we don't mix and shape there now because of the lunch and breakfast. The food business that we do takes up most of its space, and we've got a 30,000 square foot wholesale facility about a mile and a half away. And just got amazingly lucky. Bakers, I've had a lot of them since we began, and just hit the wave, the bread wave, and San Diego has evolved too. So just got, so I went from a field that was risky, like the film business, into something that is actually more risky. I was fairly successful in that, and appear to miraculously have been successful in the bread biz as well. So that's it. That's all I got to say. Do you have any questions or any? I think it's. I kind of liked it when it was when there were requirements that it was almost you couldn't spend a lot of money on it. They've as I mentioned to you, the remake of my film cost millions and millions, and it wasn't good. I didn't like it. I didn't want anything to do with it except for acting. I don't know that much about currently what there is in terms of horror films, but I think it's kind of they do a retread again and again and again now is my feeling. And there could be I don't think they've really done a good reinvention of the horror film in the past 10 to 15 years, but that's my own. What do you say? What do you think?
I would agree, and I think that film students have opportunities, but you have to be creative and use limited resources, and I think that's what people like you did to create films that we keep watching. The
big problem now is that there's no, even though people call themselves in the dependents, like Sundance, that's bunk. It's a Robert Redford run, major controlled biz. So you're absolutely right. The problem is there's no outlet for little people who want to make films, unless it's a brilliant film. But I would probably make another film. If I could look investors in the eye now and say I can return the money, I would make a film. But there's no way to, until you kids come up with a way to have it directly onto the web, or have some way that we can have access directly to the folks who want to view our films. I think, unfortunately, the horror film is going to stay either the extraordinarily high-budget crap that the majors do, or the little things that creative types do, but that are not seen. What did happen to me was that the boyfriend, generally an older boyfriend of an attractive young actress, would say, "I will invest in your film." And then it would come out to give his girlfriend a part, right? But my films were so rotten that they didn't even, that the boyfriends would have been an insult to the girl. No, they...
And you're going to get your money in return about 30... Was it 30? You're going to get your money back 3 times.
They say 10, you're going to get 3 times.
I want to know what you're going to say.
I don't think I even have to answer that. It's so. Is someone actually going to do that? Because actually, I'm thinking of making another film. I would like. Let's talk. You're sitting down the table from a person that turned Madonna down twice. Madonna came and auditioned for a film of mine, and I thought she stunk. I thought she was horrible. And I threw her out. I mean, I didn't throw her out. And it took a lot, because not only did you have to work for free, because my films were so, the budget for my films was so low, but, and if you were going to be a production assistant, as I mentioned before, not only do you work for free, but you got to supply your own car. But Madonna came, and I was rare that if an actress wanted to work for me for free, I would hire her. But I just thought she was horrible. So I threw her. I asked her to leave, and my partner at the time said, no. He brought her back again and said, will you please think twice about her? And I said, she's really bad. So if I had just put her in if I'd put her in a film, the film would be worth a ton now, right? Every film, even though the films aren't good, they're worth a lot. So I wouldn't have to be up in the middle of the night trying to bake bread, and I wouldn't look the way I'm actually 19 years old, and this is the way I look. They said, well, we'll approve this if you remove the mustache. That's what's weird, but you're absolutely right. They're absolutely right. That's,
Yeah, well, it's iconic. It kind of reminds me of the actor.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, it was meant to, but we thought that was okay to spoof because the bear. There's a scene in the film where the bear falls in love with the girl, and it's a real bear. And they have a romantic scene where they're running through the fields together. And
Well, have you
embracing.
seen any spoofs today? Because I would imagine you look at what's going out there today, and you probably reflect back on the troubles you had.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, I wish we'd had enough time and enough money to defend it, or but the film was going to open the next day, and the theaters would have been without anything to show, and they would have blamed us, and they might have sued us, and on and on. So, I put
Did
my.
they make you groom the bear's facial hair in any way in that scene?
That was tough. Yeah, it was tough. I had to get a little brush and. I think I would. I mean, I would, but as I mentioned, I could not look an investor in the eye now and say I can make a return. I could not return their investment because there's no way unless I made a brilliant little film that was just absolutely terrific. But those films, you could kind of guarantee that it would bring in this much theatrically, and even if it didn't, you could sell it for cassette for this much. You could sell it to France for this much. The action film, we knew we could sell that because that's good for the whole world. They loved action in Asia and blah blah blah. And there was no that was all done live. It was all was no computerized. So now the action looks fairly tame, and again but it was all done live. Thank you. And with the bread biz too. I mean, we kind of caught it just before. We were the first in this town, and I think one of the first on the West Coast after La Brea to make this kind of bread. So that's an interesting question. I don't have an answer, but that's very nice. Thank you very much. That's. I'll think about it.
Get back to it.
Thank you. Well, again, generally I worked my way backwards. I saw how much I had to spend, and then found music to fit. Jakarta was great because we had a whole host of musical choices over there, and we used the orchestras that they had there. And there's a nightclub scene where we had a live orchestra there and dancing, and it was a huge scene, and it cost nothing. We flew a gamelan orchestra over from Indonesia here to record them for Jakarta. Do you play? Are you a musician?
I'm one of Valerie Namath's clients.
Ah,
Yes,
ah.
I'm a singer-songwriter, and it's interesting because the whole musical scene has changed so much since you were, just as of 10 years ago. It's changed immensely, and it's
Like how? How's it?
well,
Very successful TV writer that came to speak to us when I was in grad school at UCLA, a guy by the name of Larry Gelbart. And one of the graduate students raised his hand and he said, "Is it true?" And I suspect with the musicians it's the same thing. "Is it true that writers are abused in Hollywood?" And his answer was, "Only if you're lucky." Which I thought was a great line, right? You have to be interested. Somebody has to be interested in you before you can be screwed. And that kind of with my films now. With this thing, I'm basically I joke that after the remake of my film was made for a huge amount of money and had to deal with the majors, I joke that I'm being screwed by a richer class, a fancier class of producers and distributors now than I was then. So I've stepped up. I've kind of stepped up my game. Well, again, the main thing for me is my films would not get distributed now. They only distribute the The big guys only distribute their own films, and if they do decide on a little film, they pay very little for it. I mean, if they do, my film gets on HBO every year, and they pay us nothing. They used to be in some position in terms of the negotiation, and now you take what they give you. But there's no, I don't think that people behave in a more honorable way now than they did then. I think although the guy that I dealt with, the big guy, mogul type that I dealt with, was a man of his word. He delivered on what he said. I mean, I also got the contracts to back it up, but he definitely delivered, and he had intended. I think he would have anyway. So there's a different. It was one guy deciding as opposed to a boardroom now that decides. It's one of the reasons why the films we get are so nothing. They all look alike, and the stories are all the same, and all of that. There's not one person with a vision, and it's so expensive to make a film now too. Right? Somebody's going to cost $100 million. It's not going to be one guy saying, let's do it. Well, it's very rare. Back when I was beginning, if a film was $3 or $4 million, and that was expensive stuff. Yeah. I do. Actually, all of these films I own the rights. Yep. And
You never sold any of the rights?
I sold domestic distribution rights. I sold foreign distribution rights, but as Barry will attest, I still have I still control the copyrights to the films, and I still and this, we made a fairly decent deal when they decided to remake this picture. And nobody's chosen to remake any of my other films yet. But just from what you've seen, they're available, by the way. No, an interesting question. No, no, I retain the rights. So every 5 years, there's still territories around the world that re-up, and we renegotiate the rights for France and Germany. The good news about the remake was that it actually helped my film. So there was an interest in my film again, and a bunch of other, because it was a major student that produced and distributed it. It got an interest again in seeing what the original was, but they don't have any rights in. I was not allowed to make another one. I'm not allowed to make a Mother's Day 2 for another 5 years or something. But
did you get any rights in the remake?
I got a percentage. I got a little piece. I won't get paid, but I got. But I made a little bit up front, and it was just. I mean, after 30 years, this was made in 1980. So that the fact that anybody even remembers this now is fantastic, and there are some fairly significant producers of horror films now that talk about my film, and as one of the reasons why they went into horror films. There was a showing of it up in L.A. There's a guy named Eli Roth. I don't know if anybody knows him, but he said that he had a film festival where for 4 days he chose the films that he wanted to show, and my film was one of those. And he talks about it as his favorite horror film, and it's a quote on the bottom here. But I went up there, and the place was packed. It was absolutely, there was a line around the block, and Roth, I talked with Roth at the front of the theater. He's a very nice guy, and decided rather than have a dance at his, he told me that at his bar mitzvah, rather than have a dance, he showed my film. Which you can imagine how delighted his parents were about that, right? Because it's a pretty rough film.